On Two Wheels this week, Wayne and I ride the Hayabusa Trike. Jeff has more from this year's classic show, and we send out four-wheeled presenter but lifelong biker Richard Hammond for a day with Kawasaki's very retro Drifter. And with the TT upon us, Bill Smith shares some of his memories with Claire.
Woo! A dream come true, eh? I always knew this bike existed and I've always fancied having a go, and it is a dream come true. My chance has come true. What it is this is a Suzuki Hayabusa GSX 1300R, probably about 200 mile an hour's worth of machine. All that power delivered to them big fat tyres. Woohoo! Woohoo!
What's he like, that Wayne? He gets very excited, very easy, you know. I'm getting a bit concerned about him. In fact, he's gone for a lie down now to cool off. But this is a pretty exciting machine. Big fat wheels, as he said, but three big fat wheels because, yes, it's a Hayabusa, but it's also a trike. Who in the right mind would want to trike a Hayabusa? Well, that's exactly what's happened here. And it's done in a similar way to we've seen before. The swing arms disappeared, we don't need that anymore. Instead, we've got this new subframe, all beautifully finished, powder coated, lovely bit of engineering. Still got the chain drive, as on the original machine, that's been retained. But no donor parts from cars on this. This is a bit more expensive to do this one. All instead, beautifully purpose-built axle there. There's a diff in the back there. We've even got disc brakes on the back of this one to stop these big fat tyres. But again, as I say, great bit of engineering. Flat shocks up there, torsion bar, anti-roll bar, all the usual stuff that you'll find on all the best trikes. But the back end, really, distinctive features are these. Look at this. Of course, if the back end changes, you need to reroute the exhaust. And look at this here, big anodised gold coloured cans there, lovely finish and really very distinctive. And what about this? A wing on the back of your bike? I don't know. I'm not sure that it actually needs a wing, but you can't deny the fact that it does look pretty special. And if you think the back looks pretty good, the front's not bad either.
No, it doesn't look bad at all, this front end. In fact, it's beautiful. And what are you on about having a lie down? Chance would be a fine thing. This front end is unique, it's special. The standard forks have been thrown in the bin and we've got on a leading link system. Two beautiful shock absorbers which are multi-adjustable so you can set it up to suit the rider. It's got the original Hayabusa rear disc, would you believe, yet in a front wheel which is a car wheel, and the 6-pot calipers, both of them hanging on there, which gives it some serious braking. And the idea of this front end is to help it with its handling because it's obviously a very seriously fast machine. But they're going to go one step further. Yes, more improvements, would you? At the moment, they're actually developing a hub centre steering system, which is not dissimilar to a motor car, but it will allow them then to put both front discs on off the Hayabusa and put the calipers on in the same manner, so the braking will be even better and the steering will be even better because the whole of that tyre will stay flat on the ground when it goes round corners. But there's even one more item needed to make this thing go well and quick. The key. Do you want to go fast? Oh, I do. I'm excited.
Well, you can't help getting excited about a machine like this. It has, believe it or not, been clocked at over 170 miles an hour. Perhaps it really does need that wing on the back after all. Riding in a straight line is really not that much different to a normal motorcycle. It's when you need to turn that the fun starts. It is surprisingly sensitive on the steering, almost to the point of being a little twitchy until you get the hang of it. And as with all trikes, roundabouts provide the best source of entertainment. Slow cornering is rather a physical exercise and you need to employ the old push and pull technique on the bars. But hey, this is a Hayabusa. Whoever mentioned the word slow? The pillion department is fine as far as the seat goes, but any kind of rapid acceleration has the rear wing almost slicing you in two. This is one machine where a back protector is essential kit.
You know me, I like to bring you good value for money. I'm always thinking of your pocket, right? And I believe this is good because it costs you 8,000 quid for a Hayabusa. It costs you 7,000 quid to bolt these bits on the back of it. 15 grand. 15 grand for something I reckon that'll outperform most cars. That might even cost you £100,000. So, on that basis, I'll have two.
Yes, and he'll probably buy both of them out of last week's expenses if I know Wayne. But you too could have one of these, you know, because, believe it or not, you don't need a motorcycle licence to ride this. it's a tricycle, so car licence will suffice. You don't actually need any basic training. You could jump on this and ride it away, it's all yours. I find that quite mad, really, in fact quite stupid for a performance like this, no training. But there you go, that's the law. Now, I know a trike isn't for everyone, but really, if ever you get the opportunity to ride a trike, especially a performance machine like this, take up the offer, because it really is a unique experience. Now, there's only one thing that I really need to do now, and that's just to take these. See you later.
Now, although motorcycle racing has changed quite dramatically over the last few years, one race that has stood the test of time is the 37 3/4 mile mountain race, the Tourist Trophy, the TT races in the Isle of Man. And one man who is more than qualified to answer a few questions about it is a legend in his own lifetime, Mr. Bill Smith.
Now, Bill, you are qualified to answer a few questions on the TT. You've got a fair few replicas, haven't you?
Yeah, just a few, Claire. I won the 50th one last year, so I was quite pleased with that.
That is some going. 50 replicas. You must have a big cabinet at home for all those.
No, I've given most of them away, to be honest, to deserving causes. We actually auctioned one for the kids in Alton Park, and it made £650 in the auction, so I was quite pleased with that.
Now, the TT has come in for a lot of criticism over the last few years. I mean, people just turn around and say it's just too dangerous. I mean, how do you justify it?
Well, it isn't dangerous if you relate it to the number of racing miles that's carried out. I think it's something like 67 to 68,000 racing miles each TT. For sure, we've had some bad accidents. Nobody regrets them more than me. But in point of fact, its safety record compared to the circuit is okay. It's just that the Isle of Man being, as it is, a very fast and hard circuit, if you do have an accident, you've got a fair chance of being hurt.
It's a huge tourism draw for the island. It's been going since 1906, hasn't it? It's,
Yep.
I mean, that must be one of the longest running motorsport events in the world.
I would think it's probably the last of the great races after the Mille Miglia finished and the Grand Prix at the Nürburgring and that have all finished. It's the last great challenge road race left in the world, and people still come from all around the world to race on the 37 3/4 mile mountain circuit.
What do you think it's its appeal? Why do you think it's endured for so long?
I would think it's probably the last of the great races after the Mille Miglia finished and the Grand Prix at the Nürburgring and that have all finished. It's the last great challenge road race left in the world, and people still come from all around the world to race on the 37 3/4 mile mountain circuit.
Now, as we said, it's stood the test of time, and it still has this huge draw and appeal. Some of the big names, though, have disappeared. Why do you think it's still so popular?
Two reasons for that. The current rage of superbikes, people are very popular. Also, the Isle of Man's a fabulous place to visit, irrespective of the races. And it is a place where people can see bikes which are similar to the bikes you see in our showroom, Fireblades and R1s being raced around. The Pucker race bikes, the 500 Grand Prix bikes, have departed the scene because they don't suit the Isle of Man circuit. But the original race is called TT, which stands for Tourist Trophy, and Tourist Trophy relates to the improvement of the breed of motorcycling, and that's still being carried on. The Japanese still use testing ideas in the Isle of Man to improve bikes like the Fireblade.
Because it is a very testing circuit, indeed.
Oh,
I mean,
it's got everything in it.
the only experience I've got of it is seeing a camera on the front of a bike, and you visually can't, you think it's been sped up because you can't keep up with
Yeah.
it. Your reactions have just got to be split second quick, haven't they?
Yeah, well, Tim Leach, who's in that picture there at the back, and my son-in-law, he did a video for Duke Marketing showing the circuit going round on the bike, and it is incredible when you see it from the front of a bike actually going round at speed.
What is it, if you could sum up to describe to somebody, what is it that drives you to want to do something like that? Because a lot of people will look and think, you must be mad, you're putting your life at risk here, it's so dangerous. What is it that drives you to want to do something like that?
Well, the Daily Telegraph once said to me, why is it you're riding the TT? And I said, it's motorcycle racing is like an incredible buzz, an incredible drug. And to sum it up, I said, to go down Braille at 160 mile an hour on a superbike is better than having sex. And that just about sums it up, really.
I'm sorry, there's not a lot I can say to that. Thank you very much.
Now here's a tip for you, topping up batteries. Not easy to get to, are they, on a modern bike? This one's pretty typical. See your battery buried away down there. I can see from the side here that the level's low, down on the minimum. So you've got to take the plug out first. That's the easy bit. But then, how do you get the water in there? If you buy yourself an ionised water bottle or distilled water bottle like this one, just put a windscreen washer fluid pipe on the end of it, just push it over, and if you haven't got one of these, an old washing up liquid bottle will do, but then you can easily get it in there. If you want the luxury version, you can buy a hypodermic syringe like this. I bought this one for topping up the forks, not with water, with oil, but this is a spare one. Fill it full of water, there we go, and you can just put that in there, nicely squeeze it, and in the water goes. But we'll use this one and show just how easy it is. Tip the old bottle up, there it goes, gentle squeeze, and that's it. All done, no water on top of the battery, ready to go. Easy.
And after the break, Richard Hammond enjoys the Kawasaki Drifter, and there's more from this year's classic show.
Well, it had to happen, didn't it? Finally, that retro thing has gone on for so long that they've run out of things to hark back to. And so Kawasaki, just to be different, have gone overseas to the wild, wild west, back to a time when the Indians were the only ones giving trouble to the fledgling manufacturers Harley and Davidson. And the result is this, the Kawasaki Drifter. This is the 800, baby brother to the bigger 1500, and it is very much an Indian clone, which makes a novel alternative to the usual Harley clone. And it goes back to a time when bikers were just becoming proper bad boys. So, you better lock up your daughters, as long as they're country and western fans, obviously. Once on board, it's difficult to describe the riding position when you climb on for the first time. Perhaps sitting on a very well-padded toilet whilst playing the piano is the best way. But once underway, it's really very comfortable. There's more than enough torque from the 800 twin, though certainly not on Harley-Davidson scale. Don't expect to be thumping along with the cylinder firing every third cat's eye. Start to encounter anything like a decent incline going uphill in anything over 4th or 5th gear, and you will find power dropping away. So they decided to base it on a 6 or 7 decade old Indian. They may as well have based it on an old mangle for all that's got in common with a modern day bike. But although it looking like something out of an ancient circus, it's not that creaky underneath. For instance, at the back, underneath this enormous fender, made here out of plastic or fiberglass, which I guess is a lot better than old-fashioned metal because it would have made more than your house. There's actually a monoshock. It is sprung, but you would never tell from the outside, which means your mates will think you've got a really tough backside. Working our way along, big V-twin, essential kit. On the other side, a lovely shiny pipe, perhaps a little bit muffled, but you can modify it, I'm told. And even an imitation enormous cover over the air cleaner here. Big engine bars, and at the front, unbelievably modern this, though perhaps not what you'd expect on a sports bike, they are upside-down forks. But not in the way most of us would take upside-down forks to be read. And perhaps the strangest retro touch and the most ultra-retro touch of all that I've ever seen on anything, a solid disc on the front. I haven't seen a solid disc in decades. Don't know why you'd want one. All of which is well and good. It's good to have those retro touches. As somebody's pointed out, it even's got a spoked rear wheel, which you can't possibly see, but at least you know it's there. But once you're on board, you can't see any of that stuff. It's a bike. So what's it like? Well, it depends what you've been riding before. But if you're from a sports bike, it can be a bit of a surprise, because the first thing you'll do is, somebody's had me pegs. It's here. Big old highway boards, and the biggest rear brake I've ever seen. On the other side, we've got a heel and toe gear lever as well, which can take a bit of getting used to. But once you are on board, it actually doesn't feel as big as it looks, maybe because it's narrow and quite low. It feels quite manageable and certainly not too heavy. We've got very basic dashboard on the tank, nothing here that we don't need, nothing as elaborate, for instance, as a rev counter. We've just got a speedometer that goes up to a very optimistic 120, 3 lights, and that's it. Everything else is pretty familiar, nothing out of place. It is basic, very basic, but that's in keeping with the whole feel of this bike. It's not an elaborate Christmas tree. It's just got what you need and nothing else. If this were a homemade custom, it would have had 2 fillers, I'm sure, for the tank, but it's just got one rather ordinary one offset. None of your tart stuff, this. And most importantly of all, of course, some people are impressed by looks, others are going to be impressed by noise. What does it sound like? Well, it's a V-twin, and that's about it. It doesn't... You're not going to frighten the neighbours with it. You're not even going to wake the neighbours with it. That big screen does an excellent job of keeping the wind off and everything nice and free when you're wearing your absolutely necessary open-face helmet. However, it also does a very good job of slowing the bike up. That said, it all feels very stable and actually surprisingly nimble. When the time comes to haul everything to a stop, those brakes do a surprisingly good job, even if it's in a bit of a panic. And even that solid front disc brings everything to a halt nicely, cleanly and safely. Perhaps the most noticeable feature of riding a cruiser like this or any other is not the fact that your feet go first, but the fact that you have to learn to think ahead quite a long way. There's certainly no time for last-minute hard braking and quick turning. So, who's going to want one? A drifter. Good name, that Drifter. It kind of conjures up images of Clint Eastwood in the desert. And maybe that's it. Maybe that's answered the question. That's what it's all about. Image. It's a case of, do you want to look like this or not? Because when a bike gets this specialised, it can mean only one thing. You're going to love it or you're going to hate it. The purists, well, they're probably going to hate it because it's not a real original Harley or an Indian. And let's face it, you're going to look a bit of a wally trying to mix it with the scratches on a Sunday morning. It won't go round corners fast enough. But if this is the kind of bike you want, this is probably the only kind of bike like this on the market. And if you want it, you'll have to pay for it. This is a second-hand 98. It'll cost you about $4,200, for which you do get quite a few extra goodies, like the screen and the crash bars, all original Kawasaki's thrown in that you don't get as standard. If you want to buy new, then you can buy the new 800, which is an injection as opposed to this carb model. That'll cost you about $6,200. And if you want the big brother, well, the big 1500, which is a shaft drive, not a chain like this, that'll cost you a shade over $8 grand. Ultimately then, my only worry is going to be, is the best moment for this bike the moment when you take delivery, you ride it home, you stick it on the drive, wait for your neighbours to poke their nose over the fence and go, whoa, what is it? My concern is going to be, have you then peaked? Is that its best ever moment? Are you then going to reach for the garage doors and the keys for your R1? I don't know, maybe I'd have one if it could be one of about 5 bikes.
Redrup Radial, it says on the badge, and that's not an easy thing to say, but this is a really unusual bike. Never seen one of these before, and I bet you haven't, because there's only one. It's got a radial engine, 1 cylinder there, 1 over here, and 1 at the front. And the crankshaft runs vertically, then connected by a bevel drive to the gearbox on the other side. Very unusual, only 250cc, and the only one made 50 years ago as a bit of a one-off by an aircraft engineer who was used to designing radial engines for airplanes. And so this is it, the one-off, and it's now in the Sammy Miller Museum. Now, if you thought BMW were the inventor of flat twins, think again. See this? Mid-30s Douglas. They had flat twins. This one, side valve, 600cc, very neat bike. And look at this, it's even got shaft drive, just like BMW's. This one here, by the 50s, they changed things somewhat. They've got what looks like a telescopic fork. It's not quite. There's a linkage down at the bottom that you can see there. Pivots on this point, just swings up and down like that. In the bottom there's a plunger in oil to give you hydraulic damping, and then a spring all the way up that fork leg. But not only that, it's now push-rod overhead valve, not shaft drive or chain, but look at this. Don't know whether you can see it too well, if we can get a zoom in. Swinging arm there, very modern in the early 50s, but there's no spring there. Ignore the spring on the seat, but there's no suspension spring. That's because along here, these frame rails aren't truly frame rails, because there's actually a torsion bar in there, and a torsion bar actually twists along its length. So it's anchored there, pivots at the end, linkage under here. As the wheel goes up and down, you twist that bar. A nice springy action, very much like Morris Minor front suspension, if you know Morris Minors. This one's a little racer that they race in vintage events. And look at this one, goes right back to 1915. Flat twin, as you can see, air-cooled, but this time in line with the frame. But that is a long way back. Totally unrestored, this one. Little oil pump on here to keep the oil pressure up. Really looks quite strange. Coming back a bit later, 1956. Unfortunately, Douglas went out of production not far after this one, but they've changed it a lot. Very streamlined look. See those front forks there? They were called Earl's forks. Very, very strong. Separate shock absorber there, and a swinging arm on the front. Gave you very rigid steering, but you still had plenty of suspension travel. This one was a 500, overhead valve, flat twin. And again, 1950s, swing arm rear. Quite a nice looking bike, pretty popular in its day, but not popular enough. Now in 1938, a certain George Brough had a dream, and this is it. He made these in 1939, only about 4 of them. And the interesting thing with this is, it's a flat 4, 996cc, but a flat 4 different to a Gold Wing, for instance. 2 cylinders, one above the other, 2 cylinders, one above the other side, and it's air-cooled, not water-cooled, as a modern-day Wing is. It's also got plunger rear suspension here, and a shaft drive. Now in its time, and remember this was 1939, this was £185, which sounds cheap. But when you think an ordinary run-of-the-mill, say a 250, 350 bike, it only costs you around £40, or a top sports bike about £75, this was very, very expensive. Now you may have noticed recently that Paul and Wayne had a liking for a certain Hayabusa Trike. Or what about this one? Something completely different here. Formula 3 car front end. Look at this seat, nicely upholstered. Big V-twin Jap motor, 1000cc, and even a little seat for Wayne at the back. I think they'll be after this next.
Best bit of road, probably a bit Isle of Man. Been over for TT, but been back. Nice fast roads, not many traffic, cars and things around. But also Lake District, go up there a lot, travelling around the twisty roads. It's not so much the speed, but handling, so nice twisty roads.
I would say from Bolton to Southport, there's at least 2 different runs you can go to Bolton and Southport. And it's probably one of the best long runs that you can go on. Plenty of lanes, plenty of green laning, nice straight paths when you're going into Southport itself. So if I like to go for a good burn, it's Southport.
On Two Wheels next week, more memories of the TT, including those of Tommy Robb and Charlie Williams. And hang on to your hats because Wayne has been let loose on Yamaha's XJR 1300.